Well, the academy has leaned left for a long time, but at many schools, that tilt is becoming monolithic, utterly monolithic. A new report looked at the faculty at more than 50 top liberal arts colleges and found that if the service academies are excluded, Air Force, Navy, Army, registered Democrats outnumber registered Republicans more than 12 to 1, and much more than 12 to 1 on some campuses. The higher up the food chain you go, the more unbalanced it becomes. This lack of ideological diversity is breeding arrogance, among other things, say some. Gerard Alexander is a political science professor at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. He just wrote a great piece for the New York Times over the weekend warning liberals, you're not as smart as you think. Gerard Alexander joins us tonight. Professor, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So what do you mean by that, liberals, you're not as smart as you think?
As every writer knows, they don't choose their own titles, and I might have preferred something a little bit less clickbaity or aggressive. But I just was trying to communicate to liberals, who I think many of whom mean well for the country and don't realize some of the effects they're having, that their tone, their approach to a lot of our national conversations about a whole slew of issues can attract and persuade people. Giving a speech from an Oscar stage, giving a lecture on a campus, using all kinds of, the platforms that they have in American life, the prominence they have in American life. There are times when that can be used to set an example, to educate, to attract, to lend celebrity and credibility to points of view. But it's distressing to me how often those platforms end up being used in ways that communicate a self-righteousness, communicate a tone of intellectual and moral superiority. How often they're used to berate instead of to persuade. And I think one of the effects liberals don't realize they're having is how much they're alienating other people. I think it's almost entirely inadvertent. And I think it's one of many trends in American life that's really unhelpful, that we could better avoid. And I try to give in the article an idea of ways that they might try to avoid doing that.
Diversity was supposed to be the guardrail that prevented people from going off into self-righteousness and lack of self-awareness. Having people around who disagree with you, who bring different life experiences to the conversation, was supposed to broaden us. If in most universities there's nobody who doesn't agree with you, you never meet anybody with a different view, why wouldn't you become arrogant and dumb over time, as they have?
It's a serious problem. Liberals have been such great forces in modern American life for bringing certain kinds of diversity to the table and being enthusiasts about that. And who doesn't think America has benefited from more African American faces, more Hispanic voices, more women in prominent positions? America has benefited intellectually and other ways from that. But they really have had a blind spot when it comes to what some people I admire greatly have started calling viewpoint diversity, maybe better than ideological diversity. And academia.
But wait a second. What's the point of ethnic or gender diversity if not to bring viewpoint diversity? I thought that was the point.
It absolutely.
Okay, so but how can it, like, in other words, if you have a group of people who all look different but come from the same culture and have the same views, how is that in any sense diverse?
Well, originally they didn't come from the same viewpoints. People who came from the Jim Crow South had very different life experiences than upper middle class Northerners. But increasingly, what's happened, especially through American universities, is a trend towards gender and ethnic diversity, racial diversity, but not intellectual diversity. And I think that's been really costly, and I think just some of the ways you're suggesting. It breeds, among other things, an incredible intellectual complacency. And I think in the sense that, for example, viewpoints that conservatives might voice come under tremendous critical scrutiny, are really questioned or really raked over the coals, and often presumptively rejected as illegitimate or unpersuasive, whereas a lot of assumptions held by people on the American left go unexamined and for long periods. And that's the kind of intellectual environment in which error can thrive, in which orthodoxies can gel, and in which, you're right, in which viewpoints can become, instead of diverse, they can end up becoming homogenized. And there's a real danger that that's what's happening. Not in the sense that all people on the left agree with each other, because on campuses they don't, and any academic knows that. But orthodoxies and homogeneity in the sense that they stop reflecting the true diversity intellectually of the whole country. And that really is happening.
Nicely put. I'm glad that you're in that environment and I don't even know what your political views are, but you're asking the right questions, and I'm grateful for that. Thank you, Professor.